So we're going to be talking about principles-based coaching and a principles-based approach. And with me is Ian Watson. Hello, Ian, first of all.
Hi, Liz.
So Ian, I guess let's just get stuck into it because it is a different approach, isn't it, when you're using the principles as your foundation for sharing, for coaches and facilitators. So what would you say are the key differences?
Yeah, right. It is a different kind of conversation. I mean, on the surface, it could look quite similar. We're, usually typically sitting in a room having a conversation with someone. First of all, I would say there's a different kind of listening that we would bring to that conversation. We're not necessarily looking for a solution for the person or, what they think their problem is, or to give advice or anything of that kind. We're paying a lot of attention to the feeling state that the person is in, because we recognize the feeling state as being an indicator as a state of mind. And we're paying attention to seeing what the person's understanding is in terms of where their experience of life seems to be coming from.
So I want to pick you up on a couple of things there.
Sure.
So as a coach, one of the things you said there, it's not about finding a solution to a problem. Well, for a lot of coaches, that's exactly what coaching is about. So crikey, tell me more about that.
Well, yeah, the reason I would say that is because that is obviously the reason that most people will pay a coach in the first place, or even think that they need some kind of coaching help or advice. I've got problem A, somebody's going to help me solve it or get beyond it. What we're about with the three principles is helping the person to see what the source of both the problems and the solutions actually is.
Okay, well, you're going to have to explain that a little bit more. So what the source of the problems and solutions are, I mean, that sounds like some sort of magic wand. What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that is that when a person, supposing that a person let's say they have a difficulty at work and whatever strategies they apply, it's not working out. Whether they're not achieving a sales target or they're not getting along with the boss or whatever it happens to be. What will alert the person to the fact they have that problem is that they'll start to feel probably stressed about it. And they'll have the belief that those stressful feelings, whether it's anxiety or frustration or insecurity or worry, they'll have the idea that those feelings are coming from that situation, that there's something inherent in that situation that's making them feel that way. And we start from the premise that, well, actually it looks like that, but that's not true. The situations in and of themselves and other people also don't actually have the power to create feelings in us. We have that power. And that's really good news. But most of us don't see that because what's creating the feeling, we call it the power of thought, is actually invisible to us most of the time. So it's natural that we make associations. We say, well, it's because of this, it's because of that. But that misunderstanding leads us in a very difficult direction, because if we think the problem is something out there that's causing us to feel bad, then we go looking for solutions out there in order to feel better, which compounds it. It's like a problem on top of a problem. Or another way of putting it is we're trying to solve the problem at a level where it doesn't actually exist. So we can put a lot of energy into trying to make the business work better, or trying to get along better with somebody, or fix a relationship or something of that kind. But if we don't see that we ourselves are creating our own distress, the chances are that situation will change and we'll create it freshly, and now we'll attribute it to something else. And then we'll think we've got a different problem.
So this, I guess, there's a couple of things that come up for me, because of course when someone comes to a coach, they assume that the answer to their problem is maybe in a strategy or a way of dealing with things or trying to change the other person.
Yeah.
So it sounds to me that the job of the coach up front, if you're using a principles-based understanding, is almost like to help the client initially see that you're not going to work in that kind of way. I would imagine that might be quite difficult for some clients.
Well, it can be if they come with certain expectations. Yeah, we might have to address those expectations right at the outset. But I actually find that people are quite open to hearing what we have to say about that, because it makes sense to them. So if I reflect back to a person, for example, that I might lay it out like this. I say, I could give you something that will help you with this problem, or I could give you something that will help you with any problem on a go forward basis. Which would you prefer? And for most people, that's a no-brainer. Yeah. Even though the initial problem might be foremost in their mind, if I can get them curious about the possibility of seeing something that could be much more helpful in their life than they even considered was possible, if I can get them interested in that, then they're on board right at the beginning.
And one of the things that is talked about quite a lot is grounding.
Yeah.
And particularly, obviously, for if you're in a coaching relationship, for you as the coach. So tell me a little bit about grounding. It's one of those phrases that it's hard to pin down in a way, but I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, it is a difficult term to pin down because it can mean different things to different people. But I'll just give you what it means to me. I would use that term in the context of it being an embodied understanding of how your experience gets created from the inside. By embodied, I mean you know it in your bones. You don't have to walk around thinking about it or trying to remember it. So your embodied understanding, it's the understanding that you're living out of without having to think about it.
And I guess the question then is, well, if I want to get a grounding,
yeah,
which I guess most people listening to this will do, how do I do that?
I think the way that most of us do that is we hang around someone who's already got a bit more grounding than we have. And it kind of rubs off. That's really how it works practically. We get a feel for it. And usually for most people, it's an incremental process. It's not a single aha, blinding, hallelujah moment. Some people have those experiences, but it's much more common from what I've seen. People have incremental insights about how this works. In other words, they see it a little bit in a certain area, and then if they get curious about that and interested in it, that understanding starts to grow and it starts to infiltrate other areas of their life as well. And as far as I can tell, that's an ongoing journey for all of us.
So for coaches then who are moving into this this transition phase, maybe, one of the other questions that sometimes comes up is, well, does that mean I've got to throw away all my training and everything I've learned and all the certificates and bits and techniques that I've done? Do I have to now start again?
Bury your boats and start again.
Bury it in the back garden and start again? Is that what happens?
No, that is what happens to some people. And particularly, some of the maybe high-profile people who become the teachers, that is their story. You'll hear that that's what's happened to them. But it's not that anybody says that that's what you have to do. The reason that people end up doing that, if they do, is that they realize that they can actually be more helpful and more impactful without the necessity to do a lot of the things that they used to think were necessary. So in other words, they outgrow it. They come to a point where they've actually outgrown those things that they were relying on, which is what we've all done in our life all the time. We've learned certain things, they've helped us at a certain stage in our life, and then we've outgrown them. We realize, I don't need to do that anymore. So that might happen for some people if you've been holding on to a technique or a strategy. But I would say particularly one that if you've started to see the limitations of it already, then it's already on the way out. That's been my experience. We reach a certain point where we know that this is kind of helpful, but it's not that helpful. And it's sort of diminishing returns. So if you've got things that you've been using and it's already at the point of diminishing returns, you may as well wave bye-bye to it, because the chances are you won't need that anymore. But there's other things that are still really helping you and helping your clients. I say to people, keep using it as long as it's helping. As long as you see the value in it and you see that it's helpful, continue. If there's a point where you found something that's more valuable, then you'll naturally discard that. Yeah, but you're not throwing that away without having found something better.
Right.
That would make sense.
Yeah, and I guess in a way that what you just said really reflects my journey, because I find that for me it's almost like I've just lost interest in using the tools. Not that I thought, right, from tomorrow I am going to become a principles-based coach and never use a tool or technique again. It's just that I see the limited value in them. So sometimes I'm in conversations with long-term clients who just have the very odd coaching session here and there, maybe once or twice a year. And I just notice that, crikey, I can't talk to them in this way anymore, because it doesn't actually feel like I'm going to give them any value here.
That's it. Yeah.
So I really understand what you say. It is almost like a natural, you grow out of it.
Yeah.
Like you grow out of Barbie dolls or My Little Pony, or
exactly.
Yeah.
And in that sense, there's no pressure on you or me or anybody else. There's no requirement to give anything up that is still of value to you. It's a natural outgrowing, which I think when you look back on your life, you'll see you've been doing that all your life anyway.
Yeah, great.
We've all learned things and then discarded them because we no longer needed them. So this is no different. It's just, I think for some people, it kind of accelerates that process, because the leverage that comes from an understanding of the principles is so powerful that it does render a lot of things obsolete quite quickly. And that's quite unusual. That's why I've ended up teaching this and not what I used to do beforehand, because it just blew out of the water what I was using before. So.
Yeah, I get that completely. And just for people who don't know your background, of course, that was the background in homeopathy, wasn't it?
It was originally in homeopathy, and then through the homeopathy, it was also psychological and emotional healing work. So like personal transformation that I was doing for many years. And, I learned a bunch of different techniques that help people. But I also was aware of the limitations of those techniques. So I was still looking for something else. And when I came across 3 principles, it was very quick for me that I saw there was a reason why I'd run up against those limitations. And I saw that I didn't need to rely on things anymore that were only partially helpful at best. There was something that was much more powerful that I could point people towards, whereby they would help themselves. It's not dependent on me teaching them something that they have to remember to do. They would connect to the source of their own wisdom. They'd find they have their own answers. They have the resources within them all the time, which I think most people intuitively know that. We've all had glimpses of that. So it's not like we're telling anybody anything new. We're just showing them in a practical way a kind of confirmation of what they've always intuitively known.
Ian, it's great. Thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute delight speaking with you today. Thank you.
My pleasure, and look forward to seeing you soon.